Hey, what's up, everyone? This is Nick, and today we're doing another action figure review. This is the Supreme Godzilla from the Godzilla 1998 movie, and this is the Trendmasters toy line. So, this is probably the second largest Godzilla they did. The largest one they did was the Ultimate Godzilla. That one's about like 3 times the size of this one. Um, I do have that one back at my parents' house. I don't have it with me to do a size comparison. I like that one a lot, but it's so large that it's just kind of like a chore to do anything with and to like have to display. It's nice to have, but I feel like this one here is kind of the most ideal one here because it's large, it has a presence, but it's more manageable because it's easier to find a spot to display it and you can handle it better. I remember as a kid handling the Ultimate one was just so like it was like the size of me, so it was like you couldn't really play with it. um, and I also have the Living Godzilla. That's a 12-inch figure, and that one's about maybe like 2/3 the size of this one. And then all the other ones they did were like 6 or 7 inch Godzillas that all had different gimmicks. Like there was a slashing one, a tail swooping one. Some of them were carded, some of them were in an open box. And those ones, the sculpts on them, like overall, they're very good figures, especially for the 90s. But since each one had a different gimmick, the figures seemed to be built around the gimmick. So that seemed to screw up the sculpt a little bit. You had just like odd proportions and stuff like that. These larger ones, the Living Godzilla, the Supreme Godzilla, the Ultimate Godzilla, they all seem to have better proportions, better sculpts. They have some gimmicks in them, but they don't detract from the displayability of the piece. And this one here, I think he has a really dynamic pose. It's dynamic enough that it's interesting to look at, but it's not awkward either. Sometimes you get a figure that's in a really extreme pose, and you can't really pose him around and get in anything other than that one pose, and it just becomes a statue. This is not the case. It kind of teeters towards it because, like I said, this is a fairly extreme pose here, but I think it's appropriate compared to some of the more neutrally posed ones because this is a very sleek Godzilla design. He's very nimble, agile, quick, and the whole point of having that design is to get some really dynamic movements and poses out of him. So I think they're fully utilizing the sleekness of his design here by having him sculpted in this way. In fact, I really like this sculpt because it reminds me of the maquette that TriStar showed to Toho when they were pitching this movie. And supposedly Toho only approved it because they were running out of time and they wouldn't have had time for them to start all over again because they realized they just wouldn't be able to tweak little things here and there because this design was so different from the traditional Godzilla. Now, me personally, I do like this Godzilla design. I think it would have been a little bit more palatable for people if he stood in more of a tripodal pose here, like more upright, like your traditional Godzilla, instead of being, hunched over with his, back arched parallel to the ground like a dinosaur. And if he did that once or twice, that would have been fine. Like maybe if he was running at a high speed. But I think having him stand more upright here would have been better. Now, most of the toys in this toy line do have him standing in this tripodal or semi-tripodal stance. And I think the reason for that is just for balance. Most of them had him teetering on his tail. I don't think I think they either did it for practicality reasons, the balance of the toy, or they just had designs. They just had like concept art images and like limited reference material to go off of, so they knew what the texture looked like, they knew what the sculpt and detailing looked like, but they probably didn't see any actual footage, so they might not have known how he moved. So that's my reasoning as to why so many of the figures probably looked very tripodal. But I think that's why I like him in figure form so much, is I do like the design. I like the sculpt and the features of him and the coloring. I think it's close enough to Godzilla. You got the spikes, you got the reptilian, dinosaurian look, you got the charcoal coloring. He's just very menacing. He has the right number of, fingers and toes, and it's close enough in my opinion, but I just think if he stood more upright, like how he is here, and was more aggressive and offensive, not defensive in the movie, I think it would have been a lot better. Because if you recall in the toy commercials for this, they showed him attacking the military, attacking cities. They did like a little animated cartoon at the beginning of the one toy commercial, and I think it might have been for this toy specifically, where he's just tearing stuff up like traditional Godzilla. If he was more like that and less like an animal in the movie that would run away from the military, I think people would have liked it better. But me personally, being a fan of monsters and creatures, I like the movie just for him and the baby Godzillas, but I do acknowledge that they're flawed, at least in their behavior and execution in the movie, and I think that people's reasons for disliking the movie are totally justifiable. Now, that being said, these figures are very hard to find. Any Godzilla 1998 merchandise or figures are hard to find nowadays, very sought after, and it's because there's a lot of people my age that really like this, either because they just like the design or for nostalgic reasons. And people my age, they now have some disposable income, so they're going to seek these out. And I don't think a lot of people bought this merchandise and held on to it the way they did with like Phantom Menace merchandise, for example, where they thought that it was going to be worth something down the road. I don't think a lot of people thought that about this movie at the time, so a lot of stuff just got clearance and got tossed somewhere. It wasn't like people were scalping it and hoarding it. So now when you look on eBay, there's not a lot of it to go around. So it's tough to come by. And this is a figure that I just purchased, actually. All of my other Godzilla 1998 collection is from 1998, except for one of the baby Godzillas I picked up a few weeks ago for a good deal, and I still have to review that on the channel, but and I'll get around to reviewing some of the other stuff. But I was just scrolling through eBay the other night, came across this, and saw this was kind of like the Bull Rex that I got recently. This was in perfect condition and was going for the original retail price. And I was like, hey, I can't pass this up. So I picked it up, considering this is a figure that usually goes for like $100 plus, easy, maybe even $150 plus shipping. And I got it for way, way, way less than that, like a fifth of that price, maybe even less. And I got free shipping and everything. And the seller was only living like an hour away from me. So I got it real quick in the mail. And it's just cool to have this. I remember seeing it as a kid, and this wasn't the one I wanted as a kid because it was still just too big for me. I wanted some of the smaller ones and played with those primarily. But as an adult collector, I like this. It's big enough that he has a presence on the shelf, but it's still manageable. He's not as obnoxious as the Ultimate Godzilla or anything like the Jakks Pacific Godzilla or the X Plus Gigantic series. So really incredible sculpt, as always. I think there's just an incredible amount of detailing here that they've done. All these kind of squarer scales that they have up on his head and lining the top of his neck and his upper body. I like how they have kind of the gill-looking lines here, all the little spiky ridges there. They got his stubby teeth. They got the all the nice ridges in his snout. The top of the head, very nicely detailed. His head's kind of like slightly like smushed because this is a very soft plastic. Not super soft, but it's not rubbery or anything, but this must have like been in someone's toy box or something and got kind of compressed. But really, really nice sculpts on the hands. I mean, this is like McFarlane Toys or NECA Toys level sculpting, and these were toys meant for kids, and they were just on regular toy shelves for, what I recall was very reasonable pricing at the time. But I mean, this sculpting is not like the kind of sculpting you would see on toys meant to be geared towards kids nowadays. Really, really incredible stuff. My only issue with the sculpt is I think the I mean, I do like that we have a very long tail for once, because one of the issues with these kinds of toys is you always get a tail that's too short or stubby. But here you do have a very long tail, which is nice, but I feel like it should start off a little bit thicker and like gradually get smaller. And here it's kind of like consistently the same length for a little bit too long, and then it gets a little bit shorter. But some of that's just maybe an illusion because it's twisted around. There's something about it that looks a little off. But I do like how he doesn't have to balance on it like a lot of the others. I have him in kind of a crouching pose, and he is still balancing very well. I don't even have his feet posed so that they're firmly planted on the ground. He's just kind of, he's just holding himself up very well. And I think one of the reasons for that is it's sculpted with a lot of nice balance in mind, and it has ratchet joints in the knees, hips, and ankles, which is really unique, so you can hear it. Well, actually, it's not in the hips, but it's still firm. That's the knees, and that's the ankles. It's at least in the knees, and that really makes a difference. But we have articulation at the shoulder, here and here, and we have the hips, very firm. We have the ratchets, and we have another firm ankle joint. So feet are very, very nicely sculpted, and I like how this foot is sculpted different than this one. This hand is sculpted different than this hand. Just really cool there. But I mean, you could get him to stand totally upright. Now here he's going to have trouble balancing, but he can get really, really tall here. So here he's probably like 14 inches tall, and then to have him be more stable, you can have him slightly crouching, and he gets more into like a 12-inch range. But yeah, I'm really impressed with the size, because the seller had it listed as like a 6-inch figure. I think that might have just been like some autofill or something, and they didn't change it. But I remember looking at that and being like, I remember it being bigger, but maybe that's just because I was a kid and I was so small at the time, it seemed bigger. But if you wanted to, you could balance him down on his tail and have him standing, like that. That's actually a really cool pose right there. Very dynamic. Really, really cool. I like that a lot. I might just keep him posed like that. That's nice. It makes me think of that shot where he grabs onto I think it was the Empire State Building, or maybe it was the Chrysler Building. But really cool. So here's a regular 7-inch NECA Toys traditional Godzilla. You can see standing next to him, even when he's tilted back on his tail and he's crouching with his knees bent almost completely, he's still like almost twice the height of a 7-inch figure. So really good size. Now, I did mention that even these larger Godzilla figures did have a gimmick. This one is very well concealed. You press down on one of his spikes, and it's not like a tab, it's an actual spike, which is cool. And this comes out, so by pressing down on the spike, you're pushing in this lever, and this panel comes off of his back. And first of all, I really want to mention, I love this bluish sheen, this blue and silver that's on his spikes. Again, the coloring is exact on this. I mean, movies nowadays, they get toy lines, at least ones that are released mainstream, that they would have just done this all in like a flat gray. But you get a nice charcoal gray, and then a darker gray that's a wash over it that brings out all the scales, and then you get the nice blue and silver all over all the spikes, and you get the nice bluish tint on the underbelly, and it matches 100% to what we see in the film. But anyway, back to the gimmick. So you pull off the panel, and this is just like a lot of toys at the time, like the Men in Black Edgar, the terrorist bug, the cockroach alien that has the Agent K, Tommy Lee Jones figure that pulls out of the underside, and the bull Tyrannosaurus Rex from the Lost World Jurassic Park. He has the slit in his stomach. This one here, he has the opening in his back, so you can pull out little soldiers that he has swallowed. So here is a little soldier, and even the soldier you would think would just be like a little green army man or something, but he's really nicely sculpted. He's He's got a lot of nice little details. He's got painting on his shoulder patches and his belts and his pouches, and a little bit of articulation for his cannon. I think he came with another one originally. Like it was this one and a like a green one, like a more traditional looking one. I didn't think the seller was going to include this because it wasn't posted with the rest of the images, but I was surprised to find it inside him, which was cool. So you just have Godzilla swallow him, and he fits perfectly. He goes right in there, and then it's not in scale because really he would be able to swallow a car, and there you can see he could just barely swallow a person, and then he slides right in there, and he's right back there. So I'm just going to keep him in there so I don't lose him. But yeah, I mean, so I don't have the other one, but I'm just happy I have one of them. So that's really cool. So really, really happy with that. But yeah, I remember thinking that was weird as a kid because I was like, well, he never ate any people in the movie, but I guess he had the capacity to. I think the ultimate Godzilla eats human figures as well. He also has a panel on the back, but he was large enough to swallow like the full-size 5-inch figures. So this is the Supreme Godzilla. I'm really happy that I was finally able to pick one of these up on eBay. I'll get around to reviewing some of my other childhood Godzilla memorabilia once I get it out of my parents' attic or basement. I don't know where it is now. And I still have to review, some of the smaller figures like the baby Godzillas and stuff. But let me know in the comments below. Do you still have any of these old figures? What'd you think of that movie? Do you like this Godzilla design or not? So if you haven't already, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I'll see you guys around. Bye.